Welcome to the fourth act of this presentation on JDR theory. So in this act I will talk about two strategies that people can use to become more engaged in their work. One is job crafting, the second is playful work design. So let's start with job crafting. So according to Rusnewski and Dutton, and they published about this for the first time in 2001, job crafting is the physical and cognitive changes individuals make in their tasks or in their relational boundaries. So they have three types of crafting here. They say you can change your tasks, task crafting. You can change your relationships, relational crafting. Or you can start to look at your work in a different way, which is cognitive crafting. Three types of crafting that they distinguish. We have developed our own definition and approach of job crafting, and with we I mean Maria Tims and Dantje Derks and myself. We have worked on a series of studies in which we developed a job demands resources approach of job crafting. So then job crafting, in our view, is the proactive changes individuals make in their job demands and their job resources. So the optimization people make in their workload, for example, or the optimization they make when it comes to asking for support, asking for feedback. And the aim of this job crafting behavior is then to align their jobs with their own preferences, motives, and passions. So you make your job a better fit with your own self. There are several dimensions that you can distinguish when it comes to the JDR approach. One is increasing the social job resources, like asking for feedback, asking for support, asking for coaching. You can increase your structural job resources, like trying to get autonomy or find opportunities to develop yourselves. You can increase your challenge job demands by starting a new project, for example, or starting to do different types of work. You can also optimize your job demands by starting to work in a smarter way. This is an idea of Demeruti and Peters, who published about this in 2018. And what I left out here is the reducing hindrance job demands dimension, because we have seen in many different studies, and also meta-analysis have confirmed that reducing your job demands doesn't work very well. So it's not so easy to just lower your work pressure, for example. So this is more about optimizing your job demands that is going to be effective. So this is a study that we conducted in a chemical plant. And what you can see here that, and we followed people over the course of 2 months, and what you see here that when the employees on the work floor engaged in job crafting in the first month of the study, then over the course of 2 months, they increased their job resources, so they had more autonomy, more feedback, more support, and that helped them very much to be over time, over the period of 2 months, to be more engaged in their work, to feel more vigorous, dedicated, absorbed in their work, and they increased their own job satisfaction. So job crafting is a bottom-up technique to improve your work environment and then to increase your well-being. Here's another study that is not published, but that I conducted in 2015. That's a study among Chilean consultants who were responsible for getting a certain financial output in the year by providing services to their clients, to all kinds of companies in Chile. And we see here that when the consultants had a better relationship with their leader, then they felt more comfortable to engage in job crafting, and this job crafting in turn helped them to get their financial performance because it helped them to feel engaged in their work. So we see here that a good relationship between the leader and the follower helps to perform well because it facilitates job crafting behavior in the sense of increasing challenges, increasing job resources, so people feel more free to do so. And that helps them to be enthusiastic about their work, to be vigorous and strong, and to be absorbed in work, so to be engaged so as to perform well and to run very good projects and get good money for that. So it's a really striking finding. This is a study by Demeruti and Peters who published about this in 2018. I think it was in a journal called Ergonomics. And it is a study among British pilots. So they had a collaboration with the Aviation Pilot Association. And they found that even pilots who sit there in these small cockpits, they even engage in job crafting. And when they did so in terms of optimizing their job demands, so working in a smart way, in an optimal way, then they actually showed that they performed better when they were performing in the simulator training. So when they were flying a plane in the simulator, they made fewer mistakes. They performed better when they were crafting more often. So crafting has an impact on measurable performance. It's important to be proactive so as to optimize your environment, so that you can use all your skills and all your strengths to do your work as best as possible. Well, we've seen over the years, when you talk to people, there are many different ways to engage in job crafting. You can be a coach or a mentor for younger colleagues, for example, or you can specialize, become very good at dealing with certain problems. Or if you work in healthcare, you can specialize in certain patient groups, for example. Another way of crafting could be to delegate some of your work and to take on other work. Spend less time on certain tasks that maybe you don't like so much, or that you're not so good at, and spend more time on the things that you're really good at. Setting new goals would be a kind of job crafting, using your strengths, changing procedures so that it fits better. Being innovative, trying to set up new challenges for yourself, starting new projects, asking colleagues for support. This is all examples of job crafting. Asking feedback from customers, following a course so that you learn new things, all examples of job crafting. So let's go to a study among nurses where we did an intervention where people were taught to learn to apply job crafting. So this study was conducted by Heather Gordon and the team with Eva Demeruti, and I was also involved here. This was a hospital in Utrecht where we asked the nurses to fill out a questionnaire in the first week and then again after 7 to 8 weeks. And we had an experimental or intervention group as well as a control group that didn't receive any training. The intervention group received training for 2.5 hours where they learned how to engage in job crafting. You can see the build-up of the training here. So people hear about the background of the intervention, they learn about job demands and resources, and that they can influence their own job demands and resources through job crafting. So first they get insights in what are my most important job demands, the things at work that cost me a lot of energy, what are my resources, and then they learn how they can optimize this through job crafting. They do exercises where they make rules if they do that as a team, so you cannot just quit to do some work and then say, well, somebody else will do it. No, you have to discuss it and make rules. We discuss case studies, And then the end of the training is that people make a personal crafting plan in which they set weekly goals. So we have job crafting training, and then that's not the whole part about the intervention. The intervention is actually then just starting, because in the weeks 3, 4, and 5, people implement the plans that they have made. So every week they have crafting assignments, they try to ask for feedback in a certain week, or they try to start a new project. So they have to come up with implementing their plans, and to do so in a smart way. So they have to set smart goals, specific, measurable, actionable goals. So that if they say, well, I want to have more feedback about my performance, that's not specific enough. They need to indicate, okay, next week on Monday, I will talk to my colleague Jan, and Jan, I will ask Jan to give me feedback about the initiative that I have in mind, something that I want to do, and I will ask him for feedback on what he thinks about it, whether it's a good idea or not. So people make very specific, set very specific goals and implement then their job crafting goals and plans. So what we see here are just a few effects that we see. We see that job crafting over time, you have a pre-test, post-test. We see that in the intervention group, the white line, we see that job crafting behaviors go up. So it's indeed true that people learn to practice and to use job crafting. So generally we see that the intervention group starts to do it more. This is not the case for the control group. And the intervention group, as a consequence, also goes up in terms of work engagement. And this is not the case for the control group. That is what you hope. Also, the positive emotions go up for the intervention group, not for the control group. And we see that the performance goes up in the intervention group over time. And this is not the case in the control group. We saw also several other effects, like the environment became better, more job resources for the intervention group, not for the control group. And actually the nurses in this intervention, they also took better care that they wrote down every day the health status of their patients when they were walking around the wards. And so they did their work objectively also in a better way when they had followed the job crafting training. Yeah, let's go to the next topic, the strategy that you can use that is slightly different than job crafting. Playful work design is about the task level, and it's also not about redesigning and changing your job demands and resources or changing the work completely, but it is about changing your experience of the work. So you do the same work, but you start to do it in a playful way. Very nice topic that I'm very enthusiastic about. So playful work design is proactive work behavior through which work is made more playful. And you can do so in two ways. That's what we found. You can redesign your tasks to be more fun by using fantasy, by using humor, for example, in interactions with others. Or you can redesign your work to be more of a competition. So you can, for example, try to play a game with yourself and try to get rid of 25 emails in 1 hour. That would be playful work design in the form of competition. Why do people play at all during work? Well, it can be because they need to combat boredom. They are really bored and they need to challenge themselves. So that could be a reason to start making your work more playful. For example, suppose that you are a security officer at the store, and well, there's not much happening and you get really bored because it's repetitive, there's not many stimuli. But then you can make it a game, you can make it more playful by trying to predict what the next customer who comes in, where he or she will walk in the store, or what he or she will most likely buy So that is an interesting game that makes you more vigilant, so you're better watching, which means also that you do your work better. So you combat boredom, and also you perform better if you make your work more playful in that way. Another motive for people to play at work, according to Peteltsik and others, is to experience flow, to make the work intrinsically motivating, to make it an enjoyable experience, and to really get immersed in the task. And that is the work by Csikszentmihalyi, who has written about this already many years ago in the 70s, 80s, 90s, where he was describing that people engage in all kind of playful behavior in order to have this excellent experience, that particularly is there if people try to find a balance between their own skills, what they are good at, and the challenges that they face. A third motive to play at work is to get rid of strain and stress. So if you use your fantasy, if you use humor, then that could also help to relieve yourself from the stress, or to get rid of the tension in a group. So that could be the third motive. And the fourth motive that the authors proposed is that by framing the work as a game, it becomes already a positive experience. So work is not work, but it's fun, it's play, it's a game. So that could be the 4 motives for playful activity at work, and we will apply this idea to playful work design. So here are some examples that we heard in interventions in workshops. A very interesting one. This is funny. This is of course a faked selfie, but it's funny anyway. But what we really heard is that pilots, they try to save as much fuel as possible by floating on the airstreams, or trying to get into certain time slots at the airport to be there exactly on time. That could be the playfulness in their work. So playful work design takes this course for pilots. Or a bus driver who drives a bus with tourists. He can tell or she can tell stories and make the workday a more interesting day. And or every time that you stop somewhere to look at something that's beautiful, what this bus driver told me, I was on this bus myself, is that he made pictures, and I saw also that he made pictures of people in front of the waterfall, and this made his work much more interesting. It could also be a professor who tries to beautify his presentation, or an accountant to send 1 email less every day. Well, there is a limit to that, of course, but it's a funny suggestion that I heard from one of the participants. And also a nice playful strategy could be that if you work in a call center where you have to deal with a lot of complaints, it could be a very nice strategy to try to end every conversation with some humor. So the playful work design measure that we developed, it turned out to correlate positively with proactive behavior, proactive personality, humor, creativity. So people who are more humorous by nature and more creative by nature, they are more likely to show playful work design behavior. Also, if you're a more curious person, more competitive person, or a person with more fantasy, then generally you will be more likely to apply this playful work design strategy at work. And if you do so, what we've seen in validation research is that you're also more likely to feel engaged in your work, so to feel vigorous, dedicated, and absorbed in your work. Here's an example of one of the studies that we did. That's a study with Yuri Sharp as a first author. And we see here that designing fun and designing competition on a daily basis is predictive of work engagement and indirectly of creativity, And what we see also that this applies particularly to people who are high in openness to new experience and who are high on playfulness by nature. So who have a playful personality. So the people who are open and playful, they are most likely to succeed in using designing fun, designing competition in order to be creative and to be engaged in their work. We see that here I have only one graph, but it works for both openness and for playfulness. We see that playful work design is positively related to engagement. So on the days that employees make their work more playful, they are more engaged, but this is particularly working very well for those who are high in openness to new experiences. That's the white line. It works less well for people who don't have much openness. Or it works less well for people who don't have the quality of playfulness. So this is the end of the fourth act, and now it's interesting to tell you about a study that we completed 3 weeks ago, where we looked at playful work design and self-leadership in the context of COVID-19, when people work at home. And it was a weekly diary study where we asked people every day to report at the end of the day for 5 days in a row, to report their playful work design behaviors, their basic need satisfaction, so were their needs for autonomy, relatedness, competence, were they satisfied on a daily basis? And we looked for their performance. And we found that in the times of crisis, in the COVID-19 crisis, that playful work design helped well to satisfy basic needs and to perform well. So daily playful work design is good for performance, particularly in times of crisis. Also, you can imagine that when people work at home or work in a completely different way because of the COVID crisis, job crafting can be very helpful because you have to adjust to the change, and then proactive behavior and adjusting your work to fit better with the new situation is a must. So job crafting and these other bottom-up strategies, of course, companies need and organizations need to take care of their employees, but you can also start yourself. And this proactive behavior in the form of job crafting is a very good idea in terms of dealing with the corona crisis. So I'm coming to some conclusions. I've been talking about self-undermining, proactive vitality management, job crafting, playful work design, all in the context of job demands resources theory. So we have job demands and resources influencing well-being and performance and other outcomes, but all these individual behaviors also influence how job demands and resources, how they act out. So we see here the various concepts back in the overall model. We see that resources are needed to be engaged, but once you are engaged, you're more likely to engage in proactive work behaviors like job crafting and playful work design, and that helps then to build new resources, new job resources or new personal resources, more optimism, for example, which helps then to be more engaged over time and to perform well. If you are exposed to many job demands, then that leads to strain in the form of health complaints or fatigue. And if that continues to be the case, then people start to undermine themselves, we've learned. And that helps to build up even more demands, which is not good because it leads to even more strain. And what we discussed is one of the things you need to do is to engage very often in proactive vitality management. If you do so, you interrupt this strain process or health impairment process. More generally, and I wanted to put this in the discussion, you can look at the model as, and not only from the individual perspective, but also when it comes to demands and resources. You can say, well, the demands and the resources and the proactive behaviors, they develop from day to day. So that's a within person phenomenon. So you go from situation to situation or from episode to episode, and then your behavior partly determines your well-being and your outcomes, and also your work environment determines your well-being and your outcomes. But that is also determined by between-person differences in terms of what environment am I exposed to. Is that an environment full with autonomy? Then it's more likely that I can use my proactive behavior. Otherwise, I don't have the leeway to do so. And it depends also on your personality. So proactive behavior like playful work design, like job crafting is probably more likely if you feel good, if your well-being is okay. If you're really burned out, then you're less likely to be proactive because you will use maladaptive coping strategies like self-undermining. And also, if you are a proactive person, if you have the personality of extraversion, then you're more likely to step to other people and ask for help and be proactive and be successful in that. So this is another way to put the to model the differences between people and the differences between situations, to put that in one overall model. One take-home message when it comes to job or study crafting: how will you craft your own job or your own study? That's important to wonder and to ask yourself, because through crafting you can take the initiative and change things for the better. With that, I want to thank you for your attention. If you're interested, you can look at my website, www.arnoldbakker.com, and there you can find various articles that I've published to read more about JDR theory, about productivity, job crafting, playful work design, and so forth. So I hope that you have enjoyed my lecture, and I hope to see you in person in the future. Bye-bye.